With the help of Hashem, we are learning Shabbos Daf Chai, Shabbos Daf Yud Ches. We will begin on Daf Yud Zayin Amid Beis, 11 lines before the bottom of the Amid with the Mishnah. A quick recap we had in the Mishnah on Daf Yud Aleph concerning a tailor that may not walk out with his working kalim before Shabbos because he inadvertently might come to carry on Shabbos. So this Mishnah is going to continue to speak about different activities that one, at least according to Beis Shammai, may not do prior to Shabbos because malacha will continuously happen during Shabbos. And what are we referring to specifically? To the concept of shvisas kelim. And as we will learn our Mishnah, there's a machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, and there's going to be various cases. Each one has a greater novelty one over the other. Regarding, am I obligated to make sure that my kalim don't do malacha on Shabbos? Beis Shammai subscribes to the shita that shvisas kalim is also mida oiraisa, and min hakotza el hakotza. Beis Hillel says not only is it not also mida oiraisa, it's not even also mida rabbanan. I mean, the obvious questions will be, according to Beis Shammai, how can you have food in your pot on Shabbos b'chlal? It's cooking. Or it's the cooking it's being added to the cooking. We'll get to all that in today's daf. Now we're also going to introduce some dinim of Amir la'akum. We're going to have some maras ayin issues that some things might be prohibited. L'Beis Shammai, because it looks like you asked a guy to do something for you, something that you may not do. We're going to learn that even according to Beis Hillel, that holds that shvisas kelim is not an obligation. I have to rest, my animals have to rest, my utensils, my inanimate items don't have to rest. But if there is an activity happening under my roof that's mashmas koil or avsha milsa, that it's very noisy, so that is considered a public dishonor of the Shabbos, and it will be asur midrabanan. Even according to Beis Hillel, we're going to introduce for the first time in Masechta Shabbos the concept of bichdei sheyei asu, which means that to guarantee that I don't benefit from malacha that's done for me on Shabbos, when it's done for me on Shabbos in a way that it's prohibited, not only may I not derive benefit from it on Shabbos, but after Shabbos, that time that it takes to make it, that I'm benefiting by the fact that it was not on Shabbos, is something that I may not use it during that period, even b'matzoi Shabbos. And finally, many dinim in today's daf will be around the concern. The words are Shema Yechate Begacholim. Literally, it means you might stoke or steer the coals. People today, we live in a world that's very different than that world, especially when it comes to cooking. People eat. People think they have to eat the whole time. And the houses then were smaller. You had a kitchen, and you had a primitive stove. And in order for the coals not to go out, in order for the food to be properly cooked, there were these like metal rods that were laying always in the coals. And you habitually, whenever you walked by your kitchen, you would chop that and you would give a little bit of a steer or a stoke. And that would make sure that the coals would remain aflame. That's something that was very common. People did it the whole time. And as we will see, there are certain prohibitions concerning Shabbos. Again, even according to Beis Hillel, that doesn't hold that you have to have your utensils rest on Shabbos. My kalim, my utensils can do melacha on Shabbos. It's a keli, it's not a person. But if there is a fear that I might stir the coals, many things will be prohibited to be done on Shabbos. Chevra ad hayoim hazeh. I mean, we're going to get to that in Perek Kira, but we have a blech on top of the fire because of this issue of Shema Yechate Begacholim. Or when people have a crock pot, they should remember that you have to have a piece of aluminum foil in it. All of that are reminders not to today manipulate the level of the heat, whether it is in the fire, whether it is in the crock pot, as we'll get to in the later parakim. Now I know we already learned a few lines in the Mishnah. We're going to start again. The Mishnah on Daf Yud Zayin Amid Beis. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shakol ne'im v'dvarim. Says the Mishnah, machlokes number 1. Beis Shammai are of the opinion, they hold oimrim ein shoyrin diyoy v'samanim. One may not soak the ingredients needed to make ink. One may not soak the ingredients needed to make different types of dyes, DYEs. One may not soak. Karshinim is a certain vetch, which is a classical animal food, and it's made by having certain beans being soaked in water. You may not, we're speaking about Friday, we're not speaking about Shabbos. You may not soak them on Friday, only if they will be completely finished, ready product, before Shabbos. What melacha does this go into? So lisha, lush, kneading is one of the 39 prohibited melachas, as we will learn later, right? In Klal Gadol in Ayin Gimel. Now, kneading can mean two things. It can mean just putting different ingredients together, them soaking together, and as we will see, Beis Shammai holds that's also called kneading, even if you're not actively, manipulating them together. Even when you move them together, it becomes even better mixed. Them simply soaking together is called kneading. You are putting the ingredients together on Friday. But if the product is not finished until Shabbos, so it's continuously happening on Shabbos in your pots, that's a classical example that if you hold, like Beis Shammai holds, that there's a prohibition, midoiraisa, known as shvisas kelim, you can't do that. Now, if it's a finished product before Shabbos, then it's not getting bettered. Then you can do it on Friday. However, ubeis hillel matirim, like Rashi says, misha nasan es hamayim ba'od yom, as long as you add the water Friday, so your active part is done prior to, candle lighting, prior to Shabbos. It takes 3 hours for this to happen, and it's happening in Shabbos, so I'm not doing it. It's happening in my utensils. There's no problem.
The idea for shlish bishul or shlish?
No. Okay, so Shlomo is just bringing up the concept of bishul. Bishul is a different topic. Even if you hold, like Beis Hillel, like we paskin, that there's no isur on shvisas kelim, we are very careful concerning bishul. It should not happen on Shabbos. Some of it is because of yechata b'gecholim, as we'll have in today's daf. Okay, weiter. Case number 2. Beis Shammai oimrim, ein noisnen unen shel pishton l'toich hatanur. You may not put bundles of flax in an oven. People would put flax in an oven in order for them to become bleached. Now, bleaching something on Shabbos is connected to the isur of melabein. Good. Also, I put it in before Shabbos. It's happening on Shabbos. Only if it's going to be completely whitened, bleached prior to Shabbos. Similarly, one may not put semer wool in a dyeing vat. You want it to get dyed. Sevilla, that's the malacha here. Only if all of the dye will be fully absorbed before Shabbos. Beis Hillel is mater. Now, why do we have to have another machlokes? We just had it before. No, there's a chiddush here. Here, we're using an oven. Here, we're using a pot. Like Shlomo just mentioned, when it comes to cooking, Beis Hillel is machmer. Everyone knows cooking is not so simple. Even though you're not doing anything actively on Shabbos. So the chiddush here, since it's not food, even though it's an oven, even though it's a pot, still Beis Hillel is lenient. Machlokes number 3. Now is going to come even a greater novelty. Beis Shammai holds, ain't person mitzudas. You may not set out traps which are meant to trap chaya, non-domesticated animals, oifos, birds, dog and fish, only if the normal the halach yelech is that whatever is going to be trapped will happen on Friday. Now, Beis Hillel is mater. So first of all, I want to speak about the following. There's a general rule that if I don't do something directly, grama, even though by Shabbos it will be asad midrabanan, it will not be asad midoraisa. So we have to just take a moment. When I lay out a trap, even on Shabbos, I know I shouldn't do it, but the question is, what's the issue? Because an animal will get trapped. I didn't trap it. Did it happen right away? And indeed, Tosfos makes a mention that if I lay out a trap, someone puts a trap out on Shabbos, and an animal doesn't immediately, whatever that means, go into the trap, no biblical isur happened. It was only causative. But if, when you lay the trap, immediately something is gechapt there, then you violated an isur doiraisa. So because of that, because there is the midoiraisa aspect, if it's done on Shabbos, shvisas kelim, lebeis Shammai does not allow you to do it on Erev Shabbos. I know there's a lot of nuance here. Let's leave it like that. Now, Beis Hillel is matir. What's the chiddush here? The chiddush here is because the examples we had until now, my kalim were passive. Here, many traps, not all traps, when the animal goes in, there is a movement that happens to the physical trap. Something closes, something happens to it. So here, my kalim are moving, they're active. So one might have thought they still might be machmir. That's why you have a third case, not even over here. Now, case number 4 is a different topic. No more shvisas kalim. Now we're moving into Amir la'akum, which is telling a guy to do something for you on Shabbos. Amir la'akum also includes, even if you don't tell the guy anything, you don't even hint, if the guy did something for you on Shabbos. And now we're going to have another layer on top. If there is such an appearance, you never told the guy, he's not even doing it for you, but people will think that he's doing it for you. That's the case over here. Says the Mishnah, B'Shama Yoimrim, guys, 3 lines before the bottom of the Amid. You may not sell anything to a guy on Friday. You may not load up anything on his animal Friday afternoon. All of you may not help lift a load on the guy himself Friday. Only if it's far enough from Shabbos, Bizman, that he's able to reach a nearby place. Because if he will still be walking, or his animal will be walking with an item that you loaded on him, and he's going to be doing that on Shabbos, people might think that he's transporting it for you. He's working for you. That is prohibited. Now, the prohibition of Amir la'akum, there's a 3-way machlokes rishonim where that comes from, and even though I think it's a smag, I think there's one shita out there that it's an isur doiraisa. We don't hold by that. We hold it's a very strong rabbinic prohibition. With the Alter Rebbe paskins like the most chamurdik opinion that's accepted in halacha, that Amir la'akum is mitam shlichus, which is very big, which means that even though ein shlichus la'akum, but for Shabbos, we say, shlichus la'akum l'chumra, and that's very big, because if we view the guy as my shliach, then what he's doing is as if I'm doing. That's why it's asur. Okay? I think that...
for a community, Rabbi, as we always...
Let's not get into this right now. We don't have time in today's daf. Okay? We're not saying there's no hetedim, but in our case, there is no heted, and there is the appearance of Amir la'akum, and Beis Hillel does not subscribe to a appearance of Amir la'akum. The malacha over here would be hoitza'ah in the case that we're talking about. Very good. Now, case number 5. Case number 5 is similar to case number 4, but we're going to have to wait until tomorrow's daf when the Gemara is going to give certain details, which it's a packed daf today, to appreciate how every case in the Mishnah is a chiddush. But it's about the same general topic. The first 3 was about shvisas kalim. Number 4, Amir la'akum. Number 5, Amir la'akum, but there's a difference. What's in case number 5? Second to last.
Did you say that even the appearance of Amir la'akum is a problem? It's as if the guy does it, and people will think that you told him to do it.
And more than that, Tzemach, the item is not even yours. Here it's such a stretch because the item belongs to the guy. He's doing it for him. But people might think that he's doing it for you. This is so chamur, just to make a point. Generally, it's like a double derabanan, which we normally never do. Amir la'akum is derabanan. Marasayin on a derabanan. Oy gevalt. Let's keep on reading. You may not give your hides to a guy whose job is to tan. So he's going to make it for you. It's like today giving stuff into a dry cleaners. That will be a good example. You may not give any kalim. That's the next case. Your clothing l'koyves nachim to a launderer. Only if he's able to finish the job before Shabbos. However, that's Beis Shammai. Now, what about Beis Hillel? Guys, let's leave this for tomorrow. Ubekulan, and in all the cases, Beis Hillel allows for you to give your items to a guy for the guy to do work. You know when? Im Hashemesh, up until sunset. Up until sunset. Okay, guys, let's leave the 5th case. This is a big chiddush for the Gemara, which will be later. It won't be today on Daf Yud Ches. Now, says the Mishnah, Rashbag. By the way, Rashbag is a direct descendant from Hillel. Never noihagin Amar Ashbag noihagin hoyu beis abba, that my family's minig shohoyu noisnem clay lavan lekoivis nachli, that they would give white garments, guys, white garments. Then today we have something called bleach. They didn't have bleach then. It would take them 3 days to properly clean a white garment. So my family would only give white garments to a goyish koivis 3 days or more before Shabbos. In other words, even though we paskin me'ikir adin like Beis Hillel, as long as I gave it into the uman, as long as I gave it into the professional before Shabbos, I don't care if the guy does it on Shabbos. Even though he's doing it for me in his house. There's a lot of details we'll leave for tomorrow, but he went beyond the letter of the law and he behaved like Beis Shammai. And now the final halach in the Mishnah, Vishavin, both Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel all agree, Elo ve'elo, and this will be a leniency, so this will be more that Beis Shammai is moided to Beis Hillel. Let me just say this by heart. Extracting juices out of a product like pressing olives, pressing grapes, is asur mitzad mefarek, means extracting, which is a tulda of disha, threshing, because when you thresh, you are extracting the kernel out of the husk. When the olive or the grape or other fruits are already crushed, and there is something, you put weight on it on Shabbos, so there is an additional amount of juice that you're making ooze out, that's asur only midrabanan. Don't do it, but it's only asur midrabanan. And therefore, let's go back now to Shvisas Kelim. If prior to Shabbos, you already began the pressing process, which means that the olives are already pressed, the grapes are already pressed, you are leaving the instruments that does the pressing on them over Shabbos, shetoyanim, you can leave the beam of the Beis Abad, you can leave the beam of the olive press on the already crushed olives. You can leave the agule hagas. They had circular planks that would be placed on top of grapes in the wine press if it was already done before Shabbos. And even though Beis Shammai normally holds, there's an isur of shvisas kelim. So the Mishnah wants to conclude to say the following. When does Beis Shammai say that my utensils must rest? If they're doing something that if I would have done, would have been asur biblically. If what my kalim are doing is something that even if I would do it is only asur rabbinically, I'm not doing anything here. I did it Friday. The fact that my kalim are continuously having that done, that even leBeis Shammai is not a problem. Notice we don't asur anything mitzad shvisas kalim if what's happening is only midrabanan. Yovaldik. Okay, says the Gemara. Says the Gemara, Mantana, the first case in the Mishnah was that the ingredients that are needed to make ink or to make dye, leBeis Shammai, may not be placed Friday unless it's going to be fully done, readied before Shabbos. Now hold on. We said why? Lisha. Now like we said, Lisha can mean soaking. Lisha can mean kneading. If Lisha only means actively mixing them together, just having them soak together is not a real proper Lisha. Now, if you're going to say, okay, so it's not biblical, it's rabbinic, we just finished the Mishnah learning that even Beis Shammai is moida, even though shvisas kelim is asur midoiraisa, but only for a malacha that's asur midoiraisa. So says the Gemara, Mantan and Nesinas Maim L'Diyoi, that just placing water in the ingredients of the ink, that in itself is called shidiyasan. That soaking is called proper lisha, even though it's really not needed, you're not kneading it together. You're not mixing it together. So Rabbi Yosef says, our Mishnah can only follow the Shita of Rebbe, and as we'll see, and not Rabbi Yossi. Where do we have this discussion? The Tanya. Echad, if two people on Shabbos, one person puts water in a keli, and the other person puts flour. Now, even people like us, that we are not the grace of bakers, but we know that it's not just about mixing flour and water. You gotta knead it. But if they are together in the same keli, something happens to it. So the Braisa is speaking about exactly. One person put kemach. That's person number one. Did he do anything wrong? 0. The second one put in the water. Look at the words in the Braisa. Says Rebbe, the last person is chayiv. Not the guy who needed. No, because he subscribes that just shidiyasan, just two items soaking together, even if they're not getting mixed, they're not coalescing into one unit as much as they should have or could have if you would have needed it. But there's a certain two becoming one, which is needing, you're chayiv.
It's actually kilkul if you do that.
Tzemach is the baker, but we don't know that. We don't know that. They didn't know. Okay. No, he's making a good...
People who cook, they see grains and water sitting, they're going to have a taiva to knead it because they know it's going to get destroyed.
I got it. Okay, very good points. Okay, good. Tzemach, it's shaykh that everything you're saying on a joke could be it's written. You made two good points. So if there's kilkul, then you won't be chayiv. It must be that in this case, there's no real kilkul. Kilkul for the medical offense that people like us, we're very finicky people. For the people now in Ukraine, if that's the only food they have, they'll be happy with it. Mistama, that's why it's not called kilkul. Okay, Rabbi Yossi says no. He says that, no, you shouldn't do it, but to be chayiv means chayiv midoiraisa, chayiv chatos, b'shoigig, no, ain't a chayiv achi yegabel, only if you knead the dough manually. So again, so that's a raya of Rabbi Yosef is arguing, our Mishnah, good point, our Mishnah can only be Rebbe. Counters Abaye, no v'dilma. At kan come Rabbi Yossi ela bekemach. How can you compare apples and oranges? When it comes to flour, to Tzemach's point, flour and water really need medmuz. You have to, like the word need is N-E-E-D. But there, the manual kneading it really makes it better. There's a big difference between not mixing it together versus mixing it together. When it comes to making these types of dyes or inks, the lav bar gibelu, there, it's not that when you mix them together you do nothing. This time you make it better. It's like you make a coffee, you put your instant coffee in the water. If you mix it, it's better, but it's good just by soaking. Maybe he'll be moed, and therefore why are you limiting our Mishnah only like Rebbe? That's Abaye's challenge to his teacher, Rabbi Yosef. Counters the Gemara, no, Abaye, you're wrong, no, Kenish sign. Why? Because we learned in another Braisa. And here again, we're speaking about Shabbos, we're speaking about kneading. We're not speaking about Efer Chatos for people who just learned Chagig over here. We're learning about Shabbos Malachas. Echad Moisen Eso Efer. If someone puts ashes and the other person puts water, again, the mixing of ashes and water is a great example. It's not like flour and water. It doesn't become kneaded. It's not even like earth and water, which is cement. Stam ashes and water. It's a puddle of dirt. But you're doing kneading because two items that coalesce together, that's called kneading. So here again, who says you're chayiv? Only Rebbe. But Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. And by the way, I just want to go back that in the Braisa above, the Mesoides Hashas is goydis, not Rabbi Yossi, but also Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. This is the same Tana. No, Achi Yigabel. So clearly you see that even in items, that are not like Kemach, according to Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda, without the manual kneading it together, you're not chayiv chatos. So Gemara says, no. How do you know that the word Efer means Efer, even though it says Efer metan aleph means ash, and ash and water don't properly coalesce. It's not like Kemach. Maybe, 1 second, my Efer, it means Afar. Sometimes, Tanoim, for whatever reason, there's a reason. They used Efer metan aleph, but they meant Afar. Now, earth and water is needed together to make cement, to make mortar. The bar gibelu. So we're back to saying that our Mishnah can even be Rabbi Yossi. So the Gemara says no, because don't tell me v'hatanya Efer, v'hatanya Offer. We have two brises. And the fact that in both of these brises, Rebbe and Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda argue, one of them must be speaking about Efer, ashes. So the Gemara says that's not a proof, because Midi Gabi Hadadi Tanya, if they would be written together, if you have in one brisa, if you mix Efer, if you mix Afar, then you can only have two cases if they are two cases. Since these two brises were not learned together, I can still argue that both brises are referring to earth. And when it comes to ashes, which will be similar to Diyoi, even Rabbi Yossi but Rabbi Yehuda will be moide, that soaking will be like kneading. So again, maybe our Mishnah can go L'kula Alma. Vaited. Tana Rabbanim, we learned in a Braisa, no more about initiating work on Friday. That will continue on Shabbos. problematic or not? Let's focus on the Shvisas Kelim, Machlekes Beishamai and Beis Hillel. Tono Rabbanon Poiskin Maim Lagina, you are allowed to open up a canal of water. The water is going to be running into your garden. What malacha does that involve, my friends? Zoireya, sowing. Erev Shabbos, im chashecha, even though you opened up the water, mamish erev Shabbos. And therefore, umis mal'eis ve'ohilechas kol yom kuloi, the water will continuously run into Shabbos. But why can you do this? Let's say that this Bryce is following Beis Hillel. There's no problem. You are not doing anything on Shabbos. Again, guys, take cooking out of this equation. Cooking is unique, but the Beis Hillel, l'choira. We're going to come back later. We'll see if this is indeed Beis Hillel. Number 2, you are allowed to put incense under clothing. Incense under clothing would give the clothing a good aroma. You can do it. Let's go with this version. Erev Shabbos, even though it's getting continuously perfumed into Shabbos. Number 3, you can place burning sulfur right under kalim. Kalim is specifically silver utensils. Silver utensils, I know today people polish it, they don't want it to become black. But for people who know epis about silver, there's something called black silver. Black silver is gavaldik. First of all, you never have to polish it. But any item that has engravings in it, it's many times, if you know exactly how to make it, the blacker the silver, the more the engraving is noticeable, the more beautiful it is. So there would be certain silver utensils that they would letikun, not lekilkul. They would purposefully put this sulfur, which would make it become black. And you can do this even, let's go, if we go with the Girsa, Erev Shabbos, even before it's dark. You can't do it on Shabbos, but right before Shabbos, even though Gafren v'hoilchon kol Shabbos kula. Another example, Umanichin kila regabala ayin, certain medical paste that would be put on eyes. As we will learn that applying medicine on oneself on Shabbos is asur midrabanan, because you might grind the herbs to make these medicines. You can put this on your eye right before Shabbos. You are allowed to put ispalanis, a dressing on a wound, agabe amaka, even if you're doing it right before Shabbos. And there, aside of the issue of refuah on Shabbos, here it already touches on Isur D'Oraisa, which is called memachek, as we'll learn, which is smoothing out something that's previously not smooth. And the anointment is going to be smoothed into your skin. You are allowed to do it. However, again, when you read this, it sounds all of these cases would be following Shita of Beis Hillel. However, you may not place wheat into a rechaim shalmaim, into a watermill. In other words, it's going to be ground up on Shabbos. But there's something unique about a watermill. Only if it's going to be fully ground before Shabbos. End of quote. Says the Gemara, my tamam. Now, based on the premise that this Braisa is following the sheet of Beis Hillel, so Taka, why can you not have your machine grind into the flour? It's making noise. It's called a public display of work being done on Shabbos. And even though according to Beis Hillel, let's go with that Beis Hillel, your kalim can do work on Shabbos. It's called Chilul Shabbos. That's a very important klal. Today, when it comes to work being done in your house with machines, if they make noise, there's a concept called Avasha Milsa Mashmas Koil Asar Midrabanan. Now, all of that, the answer that the Rabbah gave, Mashmas Koil, basically implies that's a rabbinic reason. If not for Mashmas Koil, it's allowed. Why is it allowed? Because it follows Beis Hillel. Argues Rabbi Yosef, hold on, maybe the author of this Braisa is Beis Shammai. 1 second, if the author of this Braisa is Beis Shammai, then we have to explain all of the cases in the beginning that it's permitted, and we're going to do so. Maybe the author of this Braisa is Beis Shammai. Now, what's the source of Beis Shammai that tells us that biblically one has to allow one's utensils to rest on Shabbos? The Tanya, as it says in the Braisa, quoting a pasuk from Parshas Mishpatim. And over there I know Mishpatim, but there this pasuk is in the context of Shmira Shabbos. It says, everything that I spoke to you is about Shabbos. Tishameru, you should really guard. Now, what does it mean you should really guard? So, of course, keep Shabbos. That means, L'Rabbi Shvisas Kelim. Again, this Braisa is Beis Shammai. maybe the Braisa we quoted is Beis Shammai. The reason why you may not put grain inside a water mill out of Shabbos, if the grains will be ground on Shabbos, not because of mashmas koil, because of shvisas kelim. Like Beis Shammai. Zog the Gemara, v'hashtas the amrit lebesilul. Oh, 1 second, no, 1 second. I take that back. Which means what he's arguing is that Beis Hillel agrees with Beis Shammai. Everyone agrees you can't do shvisas kelim. Now, if that's the case, it's like the same problem. If everyone agrees to that, so why does the Braisa give examples of cases where things are permitted? Why in the Mishnah do we have cases that things are permitted? So let's go. If you will hold that even leBeis Hillel there is an issue of shvisas kelim deoraisa, so let's begin focusing on the Braisa, gofris, sulfur, umugmar and spices. Why did the Braisa allow it? So now we're going to have a whole new understanding. Even if you subscribe to an Isser of Shvisas Kelim, that's only if your Kelim are active in what they're doing. But here, Mishum Deloy Ka'avid Maisa, they're not active. Not active, I'm reading inside that second line under the Gemara and Rashi. Loy Ka'avid Hakeli Shum Maisa, Ela Mulach Hana Aretz, Vehem Betoichai. Unlike Rechayim, we're going to get back to the Mishnah. This whole thing is going to be knocked out anyway. Avol harechayim, a mill is moving of the Maisa. Or leBeis Shammai, kiven the menachem begava, hainu Maisa delay. In other words, Beis Shammai, even according to this approach, that even Beis Hillel holds shvisas kelim as asam midoraisa, there is a machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai holds it's always considered active. It's always active. And Beis Hillel says, no, you have to look at the keli itself. Back in the Gemara.
Nobody holds like right now mashmas kol.
No one, you don't need mashmas kol because it's also dorais. Shlomo, this will be refuted. And now we're saying that even leBeis Hillel there's an isur of shvisas kelim, but Beis Hillel differentiates between active and passive. Now let's go to the Mishnah. Unan shal pishtan, my tamasharu. Now I want you to know that you have to understand how things are made. That bundles of flax that are being whitened in the oven, guys, the oven is not as active as a mill, but we consider this more active than just having a mugmar under kalim. There's more activity, and yet in the Mishnah he's matir. So the Gemara answers, it's still not active enough. There are levels in active. It's not as active as a watermill. Mishum delay ovid maisa. It's only umeinach naicha. Again, it's considered more active than the mugmar, if not what was the havamina. The fire is burning, but it's still considered passive. When it comes to a trap, when we learned the Mishnah, the third case, we explained the chiddush is there the trap is getting closed. My tama desharu. So the Gemara was saying a big doichik now before we completely refute this. You're right. If you would be using a trap that would physically change when an animal gets stuck in it, Beis Hillel also would agree that it's asur midoiraisa. But the case in the Mishnah is only either belechi, a fish hook. See, when a fish bites on the hook didn't change. That's called also passive, or v'kurkerei. So Rashi explains, kukrei. Kukrei is some sort of basket that is wide on one end, it's narrow on the other end. When the animal or the fish goes into it, what happens is that it can't fully go out the other end. So then it wants to make us a backup, it wants to go into reverse. But there are certain pieces of reeds that are sticking out, so when the animal begins to go back, so the fish, its gills, gets stuck inside those spikes. But it's still considered passive. In other words, it's not the trap where there's an opening, and then when the animal was in there, it triggers something and it closes. That's active. And we're saying that there Beis Hillel will be moedas asur. Only in the types of traps that don't move. Okay. V'hashta, however, the Gemara says, but it's not correct. You're wrong. Because I know that what came to us was through Rab Oishia in the name of Ravasi. That he clearly told us, and we're accepting his statement, that man tana shvisas kelim doiraisa. I want you to know the pasuk that we just quoted, B'chol asher amarti aleichem tishameru. This opinion is only Beis Shammai, and it's not Beis Hillel. And therefore, according to this, it comes out that no one makes that nafkamina. Li Beis Shammai, he uniquely, his approach subscribes to shvisas kelim, bein ka'avid maise, bein deloy ka'avid maise. will always be asur. And in other words, we learned the Mishnah correctly. According to Beis Hillel, as we were taught by Rab Oishia Amar Abasi, that does not b'chlal, except not even midrabanan. There is no problem of shvisas kelim. Then I'll go more. Even in a case where my keli is the ka'avad maisa, like a trap that closes, it's also mutter. Okay? Now the question is, so who is the author of the Braisa that we began? The author of the Braisa now is Beis Shammai, right? Because now v'hashta the amrat le Beis Shammai af agav the loy avad maisa asur. So now I got a problem. So why did the Braisa allow mugmar? In other words, this explains the Mishnah, but now that this Braisa only goes le Beis Shammai, and we're saying that according to Beis Shammai, even if everything is mamish passive, it's asur midoy raisa. So Yachi daf yud chesam et beis mugmar v'gofris. Right, these are the cases of the Braisa. My tamasharu Beis Shammai. In other words, they're laying in a keli. Answers the Gemara. We're going to get there in a moment. That's less problematic, Shleima, because at least over there the issue is more about the refu on Shabbos, which we said is only midrabanan, and we learned in our Mishnah that shvisas kelim is only asur leBeis Shammai when what's happening is asur midoraisa. Answers the Gemara. It must be hasam malach ha'ara. Again, now we're limiting. If the coals, whatever you're using to perfume your garments, to make your silver blackened, if it's laying on the ground, then there's no keli. If it would be in a keli, taka would be asur. So the Gemara asks a simple question, not a braisa. Beer. Rashi says, beer, to make beer, you got to soak dates, barley, more than a week. Can't make beer without having the items, the ingredients soaking over Shabbos. And we are learning that soaking together is connected to kneading. So are you telling me that leBeis Shammai you can never drink beer? Because all beer was done through Chilul Shabbos? If a Yid made it, Gigis, Ner, Pashta Kasha. A Ner, a candle is in a keli. We don't light Shabbos candles putting the oil up in a puddle in the ground. It's in your keli, and it's burning on Shabbos. Kedera, eating food. Food that's on top of the oven. And even if it's fully baked, even if it's fully cooked, you can argue. So we're going to get to those nuances in Kira. I'm going to read inside the Rashi. Titztamek means there is some improvement. It already reached Kamaichel ben Derusoi, which is who you mentioned that. It was either a third or a half. But it gets better. It always, chalent, the longer the better. Shvisas kelim, v'shapud. So here, we're going to have this on Daf Yutesam at Beis. We're speaking about when you lowering the carbon Pesach, Erev Shabbos. We're speaking about that Pesach is on Shabbos. So you shechted the animal of Pesach before Shabbos. You can only eat it on Shabbos, but you have to roast it. So they would stick the meat in these shapuds and these spikes, and they would lower it Erev Shabbos to be. It should be over the fire, and it would roast on Shabbos. Now I know that it's active, it's passive, it's in a spike. So what? So you're telling me that leBeis Shammai, no active, no passive, you never may do it. What, he doesn't subscribe to any of that? And he has to, my Shammai Shara Beis Shammai. So the Gemara has a big chiddush. Wherever there is a necessity for Shabbos, a necessity means it's food for Shabbos, or Shabbos is Pesach, it's the carbon Pesach. Candle for Shabbos. Mafkar luhu afkurei. The Rashba says, not that the owner must declare his keli ownerless. That Chazal declare your kelim to be automatically ownerless. Not everyone agrees to the Rashba, but guys, again, we don't paskin like Beis Shammai, but still this is a very big chiddush. And that's the, in other words, you have to find this heter. If not, you'll have a problem.
Can you declare your goy after?
Okay. Man tanah lo tanah rabbanon. Based on the above, who is the author of the following Braisa that loisimali isha kedera asosiyos v'turmisen? Asosiyos and turmisen are two types of beans that they must soak for at least 24 hours in water for them later to be baked, for them to be edible. So when it says in a Braisa, a woman should not fill up her pot with these types of beans and leave them inside the oven Erev Shabbos right before it gets dark, for it just to stay there and soak. And furthermore, and if you put it in those pots, then You can't derive benefit from it. V'im v'nesanam, then l'matzoi Shabbos. If you need it for it to soak 24 hours, then you have to wait another 24 hours. That's called b'chdei sheyei asu. Asur b'chdei sheyei asu, number one. And kayoytzeboy, this is all a brayse, it continues. Lo yamal enachtem chavya shel mayim. A baker cannot fill up a barrel of water. He would want to have hot water ready. Hot water is much better than cold water when it comes to kneading. Where's semach? We know this also from Pesach. We learned from Pesachim that if it's taka hot water, then it's even less than 18 minutes for it to become chametzik. So you want to have hot water right l'matzoi Shabbos. So can you leave? So the Brayse says, you're not doing anything on Shabbos. You're putting the water on the fire Friday, but it's going to stay on the fire through Shabbos. Like this, Matzah Shabbos, Hostu Shoyin, the bakers benefited from it. And furthermore, now what happened in these two cases? Your kalim were doing something that you may not do. Are you going to tell me now that we established that Beis Hillel never subscribes to the issue of Shvisas kalim? So Leima, Beis Shammai, V'loi Beis Hillel? Okay. Now 1 second. What about Hefker? What about Hefker? No, that's the whole point. That backs up the Rashba. If the owner Taka was mafkirit, maybe it will be okay. But the owners are never mafkir the kalim. Chazal mafkirs their kalim when what they are making is needed on Shabbos. It's the ner for Shabbos. It's the sheikher that you want to drink on Shabbos. Verstehst? Here, these are cases where the final product is not for Shabbos, so why would Chazal be mafkirit? And that's why it will be from now. It's a doichik to say that there's a brayse only following Beis Shammai. So the Gemara says, Afilu Teimim Beis Hillel. And now we introduce today's final big Shema Yechata B'Gecholim. In other words, when something is in an oven or on a stovetop, it's in a pot. Here, there's a fear that you might stoke the coals. Stoking the coals is also doiraisa. You're making fire or you're putting fire out. Asks the Gemara, let's go back to the Mugman and the Gofres. Right? Mugman and the Gofres, Nami Ligzoir. So the Gemara says like this, that when do the Chachamim take away Shema Yechata, if there is a logical reason why you, the balabas, will not stoke the coals because you will ruin, not only will you not make it better, you're going to make it worse. Hasam, when it comes to a person that's trying to perfume his clothes or to blacken his silver, the owner will not be stoke the coals. Now people did it like naturally. Every time they walked by the house, they would stoke the coals, but they were not here. They're going to have a hefset because the imachate, if they're going to do that, solik b'hu kutra, the smoke would go into the clothing. You have to know how these items were made, exactly what type of pot, what type of oven. There, stoking the coals would create smoke. Smoke would go into the garments. Smoke would go into the silver, and v'kashilahu, it would be harmful to it. And now we have to add that detail. Now, unim shal pishta nami ligzoid in our Mishnah, when we explained the chiddush of the second case of the Mishnah, even though it's not a food item, well, why did the Mishnah have to separate it from the Mishnah that we began today with? Because there it's in a pot. And by a pot, by food, Shema Yechata. So why did Beis Hillel allow it? Answers the Gemara there also. Kiven the kashilahu zika, a draft. These items are in ovens. For you to stoke the coals, you would have to open up the oven. So wind would go in there. That would ruin it. The draft, the wind would be bad to the pishtan. Answers the Gemara Amar Shmuel, it must be, the only way you're going to answer over here, biyoira akura, that the pot is already removed from the fire prior to Shabbos. You might steer the pot inside even when it's off the fire. Guys, we're going to learn a lot about these dinim. In other words, when you stir a pot, you better its cooking. You add to its cooking. So why are you allowed to do it? Now just to know the details, when the cooked food is fully halachically cooked and it's off the fire, you take your cholent off the fire, we don't have such a problem. But when the food is not fully cooked, sometimes you may not steer it even off the fire. Answers the Gemara, there's another detail. Not only must the case of the Mishnah only be for Beis Hillel to be matir, that it's already off the fire from before Shabbos, but v'tucha, there's a certain type of sealing, a very primitive seal, would be clay. That would be as a reminder, got to break the seal. That is when he is mated it. Oh, now says the Gemara, what did we come out with? 2 points. Point number 1, Beis Mamish does not accept any problem of Shvisas Kelim. On the other hand, Midrabanan, Beis is chayish when things are in a pot or in an oven. In most cases, there's an issue of Shema, Yechata Begecholim, which is a rabbinic reason why one may not at times be engaged in those activities. So Vahashta the Amar Mar, now that we learned, that's even according to Beis so now we're going to find the following hetedim. Hi kededim. Chayasa, if you have raw meat placed in a pot right before Shabbos. Let's go. Shalom today. Right before Shabbos, Shari lanucha erev Shabbos imchashecha betanura. You are allowed to put it into the oven. Why? 1 second. Shema yachata b'gecholim. So now we have to know another nuance. These things are practiced halacha l'mais. My tama, the reason why you are allowed is given the lechazil urta, since it's raw meat takes many hours to get ready. So you know that you won't be able to eat it for the meal Friday night. It's only for tomorrow. You completely take your mind off that food, and you will not stoke the coals.
So we're learning that the whole problem is a mindless thing. If you're going to walk by, you're just going to stop.
So Shuki is asking, this is all discussed over here. It's a mindless thing, but whenever that pot is not needed, you ignore it. Now, ubashal shaper dummy, even ubashal shaper dummy, another detail, if it's fully cooked before Shabbos, here you get that? Fully cooked before Shabbos, so you don't have to improve it. If you don't have to improve it and you're going to eat it Friday night, Shuki, you're not going to stoke the coals. It's good the way it is. Where do we have a problem? Bashal, veloy bashal. If it's a bissel cooked but not fully cooked, that is where it's asur. That's until today. That's even with the blech. We put food up on Shabbos. Be careful. It should be halachically cooked, kamaychal ben drusoi, prior to Shabbos. And if not, that's what we do. We, plug in the crock pot, then it's also not a problem. Right. To eat, another thing. What happens if you have food that is in between, and you forgot to put it on? You forgot to put it on your fire. So what should you do? There's a good heter. Take now 1 piece of raw meat and throw it into the pot. And now, since that raw meat will take many hours to get ready, you're going to be in Masiach Das. If you throw even only in 1 piece of raw meat, shaper dummy. Nokoda. Weiter. Another detail. Anything that wind or that goes into a draft will be harmful to it. You're not going to open up the oven. So let's speak about not a stovetop but an oven, which is hi bisra de gadya. Bisra de gadya is a tender meat. If the meat is tender meat is damaged if wind goes into it while it's being roasted in the oven. Number 1. And number 2, usrik. There is a certain type of clay seal on the oven. It's a primitive seal, but it's like a reminder. Don't open it. That means if you have these 2 factors, everyone will be moide, shaper dummy, that there's no problem to have it roast in the oven during Shabbos. Koydem kol, we paskin like Beis Hillel. There's no shvisas kelim. Number 2, aishemi yachata. There are 2 factors. You're going to open up the oven to stoke the coals, you're going to hurt the meat, and there's a reminder. On the other hand, neither factor. The barcha means it's mature ram meat. It's meat that whether wind will go into it or not, won't make a difference. So you don't have that factor. And the loisidik, the oven doors are not sealed. Then the kula alma, my friends, asur, even according to Beis Hillel, farvas, shemi yachata begecholim. Okay? Unless it's fully ready, like we learned above. Now, the gadya, what happens if there's only one factor? Either it's kids' meat, that means it's sensitive meat. Opening up the door of the oven is not good for it. But veloisidik, it's not sealed. Or the other factor, it's taka mature ram's meat, but usrik, it's sealed. Are you allowed to have that meat that's bashal veloy bashal prior to Shabbos? Rav Ashi says yes. Rav Yirmiyah says no. According to Rav Ashi, that said it's permitted. Ve'hatanya, or we have really, it's a Mishnah ve'hatnan. Did we not learn in a Mishnah? Ein soilin basar. Now, guys, the word basar here, the Mishnah does not differentiate what meat. Any meat. It says, Ein soilin basar, you can't roast meat or a onion or an egg, ella kadesh yitzaylim b'yom, unless it's fully ready. Now, why not? Why not? If, according to Rav Ashi, just having tender meat, which is a reason why you're not going to open up the oven, why would that mean not be allowed? So we must say the Mishnah is not speaking about tender meat. Hasan de barcha v'lo yisirik. It's not sealed. So in other words, you don't have neither factor. If you don't have either factor, even Rav Ashi, you have to be machmir. Guys, this is an isur d'Rabbanan. Asur means midrabbanan. It fits. Now there's another version. If the meat is gadya, if it's a kid's meat, which means it's tender meat, meaning that any type of opening of the oven will be damaging for the meat, everyone is moida, whether the oven is sealed or not. Bein sidik, bein loy sidik, shaper dami. Because of the sensitivity that this meat has to the ear, no one will open up the oven. You won't be mindless, you'll be mindful because you don't want to ruin your meat. Now, if you have mature meat, which doesn't get ruined by the wind, and you have it's sealed, every shaper dummy, because the seal will remind you, where do you have the machlokes? When you have neither factor, that's where you have a machlokes. It's meat that doesn't get damaged. And it's not sealed. Still, Rav Ashi holds it's permitted. Wow, it's in an oven. And Amir medifti hold it sasur. Now, according to this version, all Rav Ashi the Shari, again quoting the same Mishnah, when it says Ein soilin basar batzal ubeitza ela kadesh yitzaylim ubaydyom. Here we're saying that why not? Why not? So it must be, says the Gemara, you can't compare an oven and being roasted on top of coals. When does Rav Ashi say, according to the second version, we're not chayish shamiyachata b'gechalim? That's if the only way you're going to get to the coals is by opening up the oven door. You'll remember Shabbos, not going to open the door and stoke. But if the coals are exposed, let's today without a blech, there, bebisra agumre, there's coals. There, all you need to do is stoke it. That everyone holds as asur. Amar Ravina says Ravina, high kara, raw squash, shaper dummy. You are allowed to roast it on an oven on Shabbos. In other words, it's fully raw when Shabbos comes in, because kivin the kasher leizika, since even if it's not fully raw, if it's in a moment where there's an issue, there's no issue, because just like meat, certain delicate meats gets damaged if wind goes into it. Same thing is with this kara, raw squash. Keeping the kasher leizika, kibistra de gad yodami. Chavre, let's chaparayim. We have another few minutes. Let's go weiter. So we are 10 lines in the bottom of the Amid, and now we finished the sugya of shvisas kelim, and we are now focusing on the fourth and fifth case in the Mishnah regarding the maras ayin aspect of Amir la'akum. Beishamai oimrim ein moichrim. Now we learned the Mishnah correct. But as we will see, there is another way of perhaps understanding Shitas Beis Hillel. Let's go. Says the Gemara, Tana Rabbanan, Beishamai oimrim lo yimkar adam cheftzei l'nachri. A man is not allowed to sell his item, nor v'lo yashilenu. Yashilenu means lending an item. She'ela means I'm lending you my watch, and you're going to have to give me back this watch. That's called she'ela. Halva'ah, which is normally used by money. Halva means I'm lending you a pot, even if it's a pot. I don't need this pot back. You'll have to replace it in an equivalent pot. You can't do not she'ela, not halva, nor give him a gift, even a gift. Only if he, the goy, will come to his house prior to Shabbos coming in. Like we mentioned, there's a maras ayin. People won't know that it's now the goy's. People will think that it's mine. Now, if it's mine, why is the guy carrying it? Because I asked him to carry it for me. I asked him to carry it for me on Shabbos is something that I may not do because I may not carry it myself. Now, guys, we learned the Mishnah, as we'll see in a moment. Beis Hillel doesn't subscribe to maras ayin. The first understanding here is Beis Hillel does subscribe to maras ayin, but he's still going to be more lenient. So Beis Hillel oimrim amoide that there's an issue of maras ayin, but I don't need for the goy to be able to reach the goy's house before Shabbos. It's sufficient kedei sheyagima lebeis hasamach lechaimam. If the goy is able to enter a village, and if his house would have been the first house, he'll hit that place prior to Shabbos, even though the fact is he doesn't live that close. He still has to walk another 20 minutes to get to his home. And he's going to be walking those 20 minutes on Shabbos. It's not problematic. Because, yes, Marasayin. Marasayin only if people know that he's doing a malacha. You don't know? No, where is he? It's already 5 minutes before Lichbenchen. Well, if he's 5 minutes out of the village, people will say, well, maybe the house, they're going to think it belongs to me. I'm the Yid. Maybe the house that he's bringing it for me is right in the beginning. Or it's as long. Why is Sam Lachem is good because then there's a possibility that the item will be in a Reshus HaYachad again prior to Shabbos. So there won't be Hoitzah, which is either Yachad to Rabbim, Rabbim to Yachad, or Dal Damas B'Reshus HaRabbim. So that's this first understanding of Beis Hillel. And Rabbi Akiva, Omer, Rabbi Akiva is really the version of our Mishnah. Rabbi Akiva says, no. Beis Hillel doesn't care about Maras Ayin by Amir La'akum. In other words, all I need to make sure is that the goy leaves my house before Shabbos. The moment he left my house, I'm good. And indeed, Omar Rabbi Yosi, but Rabbi Yehuda, that it's not that Rabbi Akiva is a third opinion. Rabbi Akiva is clarifying the sheet of Beis Hillel. Hein, divrei Rabbi Akiva, hein, divrei Beis Hillel. In other words, leiba Rabbi Akiva, elo lefaresh divrei Beis Hillel, which is the way we learned the Mishnah. So it's not that there is a nuance in how far do you have to go away from the Maras Ayin. No, Beis Hillel Bechlal doesn't hold of Maras Ayin when it comes to Amir La'akum. Yes, we want to make sure that the guy leaves the house. Look inside the Rashi. We'll read the Rashi 5 lines before the bottom of the Amid. Hein divrei chulei. Leiba Rabbi Akiva lach like al Beis Hillel. Ela lach like al Tana ben machlakusai. Sh'omar. It's the Tanakam of this Braisa holds that according to Beis Hillel, you have to hit by Samach L'chaima. In other words, there has to be a possibility that there's not going to be Amir La'akum. This is just the Marasayin part. It's not mine, it's the Goy's, but people might think it's mine. We'll stop over here, God willing to be continued.